Thank you everybody for joining us today for our panel discussion on post-traumatic stress disorder and moral injury. As I was mentioning to everybody beforehand, we're specifically looking to try and help those who are coming back to reintegrate into their communities. But I'd like to start off with some basic introductions. Maybe somebody hasn't watched the entire series. So if we could just pass the mic around, everybody introduce yourself, a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what your military experiences have or have not been. Okay? Will, you've got the mic, so I'm going to ask you to start.
My name is Willie, or Will Berry. I was born and raised in Ravenna, Ohio. Grew up there, joined the military 2002 to Fort Bragg. Went over to Iraq in 2004, ironically September 11th. Got back home 2005 and kind of just cruised as far as coming home. So that's just a regular guy that happened to sign up for the military and went through some experiences hoping that I can help somebody not repeat my path. So.
Sure will.
You're going to need to hold the mic pretty close.
My name is Antigone Lowery. I joined the Army in 2012 right out of college. I enlisted, served as a unit supply specialist for 4 years. Had one tour in Korea, my first duty station, and there I met a female chaplain. I had never met any women who served as chaplains until that point, so seeing her was kind of a big deal for me, and I knew why I had joined, which was to pursue chaplaincy. So I finished my active duty contract in 2015, went straight to seminary in New York City, was commissioned into the chaplain corps in 2017, and so I serve as an Army Reserve chaplain at a medical unit now, and it's something that I'm really thankful for my enlisted experience and how that helped prepare me, I think, to serve in the capacity that I serve in now. And I don't see myself getting out until the Army pushes me out, which hopefully won't be for another 20 years or so.
My name is Starr. I enlisted in the Army in 2004 as a combat medic. I was stationed at Fort Campbell with the 101st Airborne Division. In 2005, we deployed to Iraq, served a 12-month tour there, and then was discharged from the Army in 2007. One thing I noticed when I was discharged was when I was in service, we always had a mission and we had camaraderie. And I noticed when I was discharged, the mission was gone and the camaraderie was gone. So that was difficult for me to transition, and it wasn't until I regained a mission and I regained connection, camaraderie, so to speak, that I started seeing improvements in my life. But it's good to be here today.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, my name is John Shloop. I served in the Army from 1974 to 1978. I was in the infantry. Served with the 172nd Arctic Light Infantry and with the Old Guard in Washington, D.C., 3rd Infantry. Left the service in 1978 and went to seminary, and the rest is history. 37-year career as a pastor, and that's it. So glad to be here.
My name is Erin Aven. I'm a counseling psychologist. I work with the Summa Health System in Akron, and one of my roles is working as an outpatient psychotherapist in the Traumatic Stress Center, so specializing in the treatment of post-traumatic stress and other traumatic stress-related issues. I don't personally have a military background, but I have had the privilege and honor of sitting in my therapy room with service members and veterans and learning from them and kind of witnessing their journeys of healing. So I'm happy to be here today. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And I guess I'll go ahead and join everybody else and introduce myself so that the folks watching this will know who I am. My name is Jason Sims. I served in the military from 1989 to 2011. In those 21 years, I saw deployments in 4 different combat theaters, ranging from Somalia to Bosnia, Kosovo, and last but not least, Afghanistan. Both my children were born overseas, and unfortunately, I was not able to be there because I was deployed with both of their births. So I take what we do very seriously, and Chris, I think what you mentioned about finding community, finding mission is what we're all about here today. So that's what I'd like to kick off the discussion with. So Will, you mentioned you came back and you wanted to help others so that they didn't have to go through what you went through. I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember exactly what you said, but I think that was somewhat close. And I know you work for the VA, so if you don't mind, I'm going to throw that out there. But could you tell us a little bit more about what you mean by I wanted to try and help others so that they didn't have to go through what I went through?
All right. So I came home, like I said, 2005. I was 20 or 21, I can't remember. And I was married. Married the girl from, I guess I could call her my high school sweetheart then. But I was married, came home, and obviously the person that she had known through high school all the way up until the day I came back was now a different person. So I think I did a lot of drinking, number one. And just a lot of, I think Chris hit it right on the head. Chris, right? Chris, yeah. About mission and camaraderie. I always needed to be doing something. You go from 150 miles per hour to a screeching halt, I think is idle hands is a devil workshop. So I just, a lot of just doing things that I wasn't supposed to be doing, looking for that same rush or thrill so I got into some trouble with the law in 2009. I was facing prison time. And so I went to the Freedom House to volunteer, which is a homeless veteran shelter in the Kent area. I went there to volunteer. I was going to do anything to show this judge that I'm trying to be a great part of the community, not necessarily wanting to do it, but I went anyway. And then I learned about the Warrior's Journey Home from some people that worked at the Freedom House. And so nothing happens on accident. I'm a firm believer in faith, and it's just what I needed. Even though I didn't want to do it, I wasn't going to volunteer at the Freedom House because I wanted to go help veterans at the time. I was actually really kind of disgusted with my uniform when I came home. I don't want to say that I wasn't patriotic. I was just, putting that uniform on just gave me a feeling I didn't like. I can't even really adequately explain what it was, but I just didn't like it. So the volunteering started as just me trying to save my own behind. But then it ended up growing on me because people were coming in and, even though some of them were homeless, some of them weren't, I started to get that camaraderie again because they understood what I was going through or understood what I had went through. At the time I was, like I said, 21. So I don't think PTSD I don't even think I heard the term. When I came home from overseas, when we were demobbing, one thing I can remember, and I just remember this, is, the superiors kind of saying, well, if you have something wrong, that's okay. You need to let them know. You need to let people know. But if you do, we all have to stay here. So nobody wants to be that person that's gonna. So at that point, that was my starting of just avoiding and just compressing things down. I mean, it took me until probably the last 3 to 5 years even, go into counseling and even go and start doing all that stuff. But at the pivotal time where I could have either went completely left or out of my mind, the Warrior's Journey Home is where I found comfort in. And my mom actually really liked it. I ended up going to prison anyway. All the volunteering and all that stuff didn't matter to the judge. She didn't care. I know, people say, well, I can't believe you tell people that. It doesn't matter. I'm here now in front of you. That was the past. And so I really just, all of my experiences have, I've been to the top of the top, to the bottom, and now, as maturing now a little bit more and understanding what was going on, I feel like I have the, I don't even want to call it an obligation because I enjoy doing it, but it's my mission, I guess, for lack of a better term, to make sure that if something's going on, you need to just let somebody know. I mean, as cliche and as minuscule as it seems, just saying something and talking about it, getting it off your chest, whatever it may be, is definitely a help. But it took me a while. It took me a long time. Not even, with the Warrior's Journey Home, I would be there, I'd come, and then I wouldn't come, and then it would just be because talking about it, we don't want to do it. There's nothing, really nothing to talk about if you were asked to ask us, I guess. And it's because it's just an avoidance tactic. I learned that. That's a great word. I learned that from my counselor. And so, to stop avoiding is really just is what I came, and not to care what people think about whatever it is you have to say. So that's kind of my journey as far as, I was in trouble with the law, and God puts things and people and in your life that you need at that time, and that's what the Warrior's Journey Home was for me. So.
Okay, great. So Will, you had mentioned both your wife and your mother when you were speaking about how your coming home experience was. Is there anything as a veteran that you would like to tell other family members, other wives, other mothers, brothers, sisters, that they can do to maybe help their veterans make that journey a little smoother?
Patience. It's easy to say. I feel hypocritical because I don't have any myself. But it's just patience. Also, not letting me or the veteran make excuses. I think it's easy for. As a veteran, my job was to be manipulative in the Army. I was a psychological operations specialist, so, and that's what I did at home. I would try to make somebody else feel bad, so I didn't have to talk about it.
So you didn't have to feel.
So I didn't have to feel, right. So like I said, between the last 3 to 5 years is when I think was the first time I really actually sat in front of another person and cried, sobbing. And I think that was the first time that I felt. So then I didn't go back to counseling for a few weeks after that. But patience is the only thing, and to not let them make excuses. If that's your son or your husband or your daughter or your wife, you know them sometimes better than they know themselves. And so to be patient, but to not let them make excuses is really the only, I can't put it in a better way. There's probably a way more eloquent way to say it, but be patient, but don't let them make excuses. You still have to push it, so.
Thank you.
No problem.
Dr. Aven, I'd like to ask you a similar question. We know that you work in trauma and critical care. You said you often work with people within the first hours to 24 hours after a traumatic event. I would like to ask you specifically what advice you would give to other providers, whether it's first responders or ER providers, nurses, et cetera, when they're working with somebody who has PTSD or complex PTSD or somebody who has combat experience. How can you help them be better providers in those situations?
I think the most important thing that I would emphasize for various providers is that when you're seeing people behaving badly or acting out, or, you know, just not cooperating, to view that as probably a symptom of something underlying for them, a symptom of that underlying trauma. And I think if we're able to shift from kind of viewing people as, you know, kind of being problematic to viewing the problem as being the trauma that we need to address with them, then that helps to kind of defuse the situation and it helps to humanize people. And so I think that's the biggest thing, is just to see, as I talked about earlier today, kind of viewing those symptoms as a normal reaction to an abnormal event. And so the problem does not lie within the person. The problem lies in their reaction to the trauma and how they are trying to adapt to that, and that they're all doing the best that they can. And we need to meet them where they're at and help them to do better. And I think a little bit of understanding and a little bit of patience, as Will said, can go a long way.
Right. So if I could summarize, treat the behavior as a symptom rather than as the person, and that's who they are.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And
Sure.
the patience, I agree with. As a father, I don't have much of it myself. Chris, if you don't mind, you had talked about finding a mission, and you'd had some struggles post-Army, but before you found a mission. If you could explain a little bit about what mission you found and how you came to that, so that maybe other people can figure out, you know, how they can find a mission in life as well and how they can fill that gap.
Certainly. Yeah, so I got out and, you know, I lost the mission, I lost the camaraderie. I think in civilian talk we call that purpose and connection. And that was a dangerous place for me. And I'm trying to navigate civilian life again. And I was suffering from some symptoms of PTSD, and well, I self-medicated and to treat those symptoms. And that got me into trouble. You know, drugs and alcohol have a tendency to do that. So I also had my run-ins with the law, and I was lost, and I wasn't engaging with treatment. I didn't even admit there was a problem a lot of the time. But it wasn't till the consequences of my behavior were staring me straight in the face that I had to recognize there was a problem, and that was a turning point. And then looking at solutions for my problem, getting into treatment, getting sober. I started seeing a path laid out in front of me, and that's where that purpose came in. I remember I got a letter from one of the guys I used to serve with, and he was going through our platoon, and he was telling me what everyone was doing now, and you know, Specialist Sullivan had killed his father and then himself. Sergeant Graves drove his truck into a tree. Sergeant Watson died on a motorcycle accident. Specialist Lucarin was in jail and was in prison in Texas. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what happened to us? And I thought, well, I need to get myself right so I can help out my guys. And that was kind of where I was at. And slowly this purpose started to emerge. And as I'm doing that, I was actually in Veteran Specialty Court as a participant, as a defendant. It's called Valor Court, Summit County. And I'd see guys come in, and it reminded me of where I was at when I got out. And I saw purpose in maybe showing them what I learned, showing them how I did it, and helping them find their path. So, you know, that was about finding that purpose. And I graduated from that court, and I started volunteering with the court. And the judge eventually offered me a job. And that's my mission today. My mission is to help these men and women who served our country navigate being back here. Help them find their mission and their purpose, or their connection or camaraderie. And we see the benefits, and that's why we got a great partnership with Warriors Journey Home. We've had Valor Court people go through meet with them and participate in their healing, listen, speak, heal. And we see the benefits. So that was, it was almost out of desperation, I think, that I found that purpose. but I also believe in the divine, and I believe that that was laid out in front of me, that this path that I'm on. And, I feel just as much like a soldier today than when I was in there, because I have my camaraderie and I have my mission.
Thank you very much. Pastor Lowery, you have the unique position of being the only one still in uniform of our panel today, of our participants today. So I'm going to ask you a rather unique question. Knowing what you know of others' stories and the people you've talked to and the people you still minister to today, how would you recommend somebody prepare themselves for the journey from active service back into the civilian life? And what tips would you have for them?
Finding community, I think, is really important, and I don't think it's always prioritized when we're helping a soldier or another troop service member transition from the military, whether it's reserve, guard, or active duty, back into civilian life. I think it's up to the commands, in that the chaplain, he or she has a really unique role in assisting with that and reminding them that there is a community for you. It may look very differently than the one you had when you were in uniform, but that doesn't mean it's going to be any less valuable. So if you're going straight to college, get involved in things that are going to help you find whatever point of connection, camaraderie, mission, purpose that you need. If it's them going back into the workforce, find your community, whatever that looks like. And I think using your resources, so other veteran organizations, is one way to help service members do that. So that's what I would start with. Find your community. And then 2, tell your story. I think one of the most healing things that we can do in our lives, whether or not you served, is to tell your story. And finding people who are going to be active listeners, rather than someone who's trying to find a point of connection, is a good way to do that. So if it's a clergy person, if it's another chaplain, your resources at the VA, I think that's going to be really invaluable to assist people with finding who they are outside of the uniform, or discovering who they are, rather, outside of that uniform. So those are the 2 things that I would start with: community and telling your story.
So if you don't mind, I'd like to follow up a little bit on the second part of that, telling your story and finding who you are outside of the uniform. One of the threads I picked up on in both Chris and Will's story is when they first started telling their story, when they first came home, it was very much about the image they portrayed. And I think that's true of many of us when we served. I mean, we put on a uniform and it's all image, and we have to, in order to get advanced, it's all image. How do you help somebody? What advice would you give to somebody to get real and to tell their story in a real way and put that image aside so that they can begin to heal?
Yeah, I think that's always going to be an essential part of our identity, is our service. And so I don't think that anyone should feel as if they have to let go of that, because it's invaluable. It really is, the good parts and the challenging parts. But I think being really cognizant of who's willing and able to listen and hold that, and also encourage or remind you of who you can be and are becoming, right? We have choices about the kind of people we are and the kind of people we are becoming. And so I think in putting ourselves out there, whether it's you're going straight from the service to college, that's one way to discover your gifts and who you want to be. Or if it's you going into the workforce, I think that there are a number of ways that we can hold both our experience and how that shaped us, and allow that to shape us into someone we desire to be. But I think you have to find a resource, a person, an organization to help you do that. I think it's challenging to do on your own.
Thank you. Reverend Shloop, I know that you've done a lot of work with both victims of trauma, but also you've done a lot of work with first responders and community members, police forces. Do you have any advice on either side of the fence how to deal with traumatic events or how to deal with situations where military PTSD sufferers and first responders are coming together.
Yeah, that's a complicated, complex question, and I don't know that I can answer it succinctly or efficiently in the time period we have now, but I think the initial approach I have with someone who is suffering with post-traumatic stress disorder or a moral injury is to be present and just be available without judgment, without comment, without thinking I have to save somebody, save someone. Just companionship, I've found, is probably in kinship with finding that unit camaraderie. That's what, when I separated from the service in 1978, it was awful. I didn't fit in with any organization or anything. Oftentimes I was seen as adversarial. And I hope I'm not projecting or transferring those kind of feelings, but someone who's experienced trauma, it's just be patient, be present, and if you don't know what to say, keep your mouth shut. There was a story called The Horse Whisperer that came out years and years ago, and it was made into a movie, and I'll be very, very quick. Pilgrim is the name of the horse, and the horse has been traumatized trying to save its young rider, who was about 12 years old, and ended up getting hit by a tractor trailer hauling logs. And the horse was going to be put down. As a last resort, they send Pilgrim out to be with the horse whisperer, who's Robert Redford. And they keep the horse caged up and doing really ineffective things. And the horse became more violent, more dangerous to be around. And so what Robert Redford does is, as soon as this horse arrives, Pilgrim arrives, he opens the barn door and lets Pilgrim take off and just run, running inside a fenced-in pasture until it's so exhausted it has to stop running. And when, I think it's Tom McLean is the role that he plays, Robert Redford, when he sees this horse stop running, he goes out and sits down in the field. And he's just present. In the next several frames, the horse gets a little bit closer each time. And eventually, the horse trusts Tom McLean enough to let him approach the horse. And that's been my experience with people who have gone through traumatic events, is be patient, sit and wait, but be present. Be present. I don't know if that's an answer to your question, but that's a very difficult thing for us to practice in the communities we live in, because we're always trying to fix something. I try to normalize what a person may say are symptoms of a diagnosis. Well, how are you supposed to feel and act when you've gone through this? You know, it's an abnormal thing you've gone through, and yeah, the behaviors may cause trouble for you and for other people, so we'll talk about that later, but initially, I'm just going to be with you through this. So does that answer your question?
Well, as you said, it's a rather difficult question to answer, but I think speaking with patients, being patient, and one of the advices you gave me early on in our relationship was listen with an open heart. Mm-hmm. I think, but that's kind of what you're talking about, and that's where we have to start. And yes, I think that'll answer. If people will remember that in the beginning, that's a good place to start answering that question. Okay. I'd like to ask specifically, Chris and Will, what advice would you, since both of you have had legal issues and both of you have run afoul of the law, what advice would you give to your younger self on that day that you derosed, on that day that you took the uniform off and you walked back into quote unquote civil world, what advice would you give to that younger self to maybe that could have changed something? Or would you even try and change it?
Thanks, Jason. That's an interesting question. I think I'm grateful for every experience that I've had. I don't know if I'd go back and change anything, but maybe some useful guidance to my former self during that transition would be continue the mission, find a new one, make new connections, find that camaraderie. And I think I was really hard on myself. I think, Dr. Aven talked about separating the behavior from the person, and my behavior was horrible, but I thought it was me. I got back and I thought that I was what I did, and I think I could have been a lot easier on myself, because that doesn't help anything. I think I could have been a lot easier on myself, and honest with myself too, because as Will was talking about, I remember we came back from our deployment and we weren't supposed to have any problems at all. I remember we were being like debriefed or something. We all had to go through these checklists. It was like, okay, you don't have any emotional mental problems, do you? Nope. You couldn't. There's a sergeant standing right there, just glared at you, and you better not. But that's not effective when you do have something, if you don't admit it. And I didn't admit it, and so I think that'd be it. Is I could have been easier on myself. I could have been more honest that I was experiencing some issues, and I think finding the next mission and building connection, developing a community would have helped a lot.
Excellent, thank you.
What would I have told younger me? I definitely, like Chris, I wouldn't have changed anything. I guess that's the cliche. I wouldn't change anything, but I needed it. I needed to be, unfortunately, as dumb as it sounds, I needed to be sat down in jail alone by myself, so that I could really reflect on how did you get here? What's going on? So I would have told myself maybe to do it in a different way, not jail. But the only thing that I could say is to, like Chris said, be honest with yourself. Even, just go talk. I'm a talker, which is really funny until someone wants to talk about something that I don't want to talk about. So the only advice I would have given to my younger self, and listen to the people around you, that love, that care for you, because they're going to let you know. Because my behavior was, it was excusable because I went to war. That's unfortunate. I was very immature. So I'm allowed to be drunk because I went to war. I'm allowed to do this because I'm taking care of my family. I went to work every day. Life was good, but until it wasn't. And so the only thing I would say is to be honest with yourself, talk to the ones and listen to people around you that are trying to give you advice. I mean, it took me, like I said, till I was almost 30 years old to realize that I don't know everything. And so listen.
All right, thank you. Yes. Right. So I'll repeat the question for the recording. Peggy asked, is the part of the problem the stigma in our society as a whole that mental health issues have? so that it's not okay to be okay. Can you address, or do you have any advice for the stigma of even admitting that you have a mental health issue? I'll open it up to the whole panel as a whole.
Yeah, I would say I didn't want to say that I didn't, like I said, I didn't hear the term PTSD for a while. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I was 21, 22 years old. I'm not going to say, oh yeah, I have a problem with my, but I didn't, like I said, I didn't know. I didn't have it wasn't a problem, but yeah, I mean, as a male, you don't know, you just, I guess society, it's not norm, it's just not the norm, to.
Right, we have to be John Wayne, Wesley Snipes, and Denzel.
Right, all, yeah,
all
in one, yeah. So that was me, that was the numbness for me. So it was better to be numb and avoid it, and then to have to talk about it, and then but you don't understand what that's doing to you. When you wake up and you're just mad and you don't know why.
But believe you have a right to be.
But I have a right to be because I went to war. So that's that's really the only thing that I can say, that having a mental health disorder, and I still don't go out and yell it to the masses now, but if it can help somebody to admit it, then I definitely do that at this point.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on the subject?
I think part of it just starts with the language that we use when veterans are coming back into a community and trying to find their place in that. So words have power. And so I personally steer away from using terms like issues. It's your reality, right? And you're just trying to figure out how to navigate it. And I think that the VA is a perfect place to begin to change that language, which then in turn can help a person figure out how to face their reality and the things that they are struggling with, but surely can overcome. Like AA or GA or NA, right? There's no graduation, but there's progress. And I think that so many of our communities can be really helpful in how we talk about our veterans and the challenges that they face that are really unique to their experiences, their service. Even people make assumptions about suicidal ideations, for instance, and why a person might choose to what we term now in the military suicide, and assume that they must have been in combat experience. But more often than not, they have no combat experience. Right. So we wonder, why is that? I think a part of that is we just don't understand how to communicate with them, or how to help them communicate exactly what they need, what they're struggling with. And so we say, put on a strong face, sorry, you got this, you'll figure it out, and then send them on their way. But if we're going to send them on their way, send them to people that can actually help them communicate, verbalize what it is they're feeling and why they feel that, so that they can then begin to address it. So I really value the role of mental health counselors and the like, both in the civilian world and in the military. So I would just to summarize, I would start with being really cognizant of the language that we're using to address or describe someone's experience.
I love what you say about language. It reminds me of an incident. My own father was a Vietnam vet, and I was at the VA in Denver, Colorado with him, and when he purchased a hat that said, "Dysfunctional veteran, leave me alone." And as he was purchasing it, the guy said, "Yeah, that's one of our most popular sellers." And, the language, yes, it's ironic, and yes, it's kind of funny, but at the same time, it's what puts a distance between us and healing, puts a distance between us and our loved ones. And I think, if I may summarize what you were saying, not only do we have to have the language, but we have to have a safe place, whether it's in a counseling office, a group session, a Warrior's Journey Home healing circle, We have to have a safe place in which we can speak openly and honestly and use that language, even if we don't use it. I think you said, Will, to the entire masses. We have to have a place where we can use it. Yes, Reverend Shloop.
Comment, just reflecting on your question and hearing the answers, and just to affirm what's been said. But my experiences being a Vietnam era veteran was we were not welcome, whether you served in Vietnam or not. And I left the Army and went into graduate school and was immediately suspect by fellow students who had gone from high school, college to graduate seminary. And my path was, and there were a few of us that had gone from high school to college, or high school to the military, and then college, and then graduate seminary. But there was prejudice on both sides of the equation. I didn't much care for the civilians, and they didn't much care for me. And it was all based on assumptions and ideas that were in my head. And I'm sure it was assumptions and ideas in their head as to what it meant to be a veteran, what it meant to be a soldier. And there was no place to fit in. Because I hadn't gone to war, I did not fit in with a VFW, okay? And the American Legion didn't exactly start welcoming people who were era veterans. So, there's a lot to that. When we talk about the community welcoming people home, probably the safest place would be in a therapist's office, where paying somebody to listen to you and not answer everything that you have to say. But finding that community and a place to fit in is of vital importance. And that's one of the things Warrior's Journey Home keeps vigilant about. So,
Thank you. All right. I think this has been a very helpful and productive session this afternoon. Does anybody have anything else that they would like to add or contribute about any of the questions we've raised today? All right. Again, I'd like to thank you very much for your time and your honesty and integrity today, and your willingness to share with us. Have a good afternoon.